Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Opto Sessions. I have the pleasure of welcoming Jeff Booth on this show, entrepreneur, technology leader, and author of The Price of Tomorrow. How's it going, Jeff?
Great. Thanks for having me, Ed.
Where are you calling from today?
I'm just outside of Vancouver at our lake house.
Oh, nice. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Is it still it's pretty warm in there in the summer?
Yeah, it's pretty nice right now.
Okay, cool. I can see a guitar there in the background as well. Are you keen guitarist?
I would say keen guitarist. I'm a good campfire guitarist.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the best anyway, I suppose. That gets you a long way. Thanks again for giving us the opportunity to have a chat. There's a lot of things you've talked about in books you've written, and I suppose a place to start is related to your the latest book that you wrote, author of The Price of Tomorrow, obviously. So I thought we could start by talking about our economic system and how it's evolving from being suited for past conditions to one for the future.
Sure. The economic system we've lived in and have always lived in has gone through these phase changes because it was always built on essentially growth needing inflation, and inflation. And if you ask yourself that question, why is inflation needed in the first place? Because inflation steals from some people and gives through essentially manipulating money, and steals from some people and gives to others. Why is theft needed in the base of our economic system for us to be productive around the world? It doesn't make a lot of sense. But there was so much power in capturing money and controlling money over people. If you could do that, you would have more people. You would have a superpower like no other. That it always concentrated and consolidated into an inflationary monetary system. And what we heard from it is, and what most people still believe is, you have to have an inflation in an economy. That's simply not true. You need inflation in a debt-based economy if you've made credit the base layer, but it's not true in an economy. And so what ends up happening throughout time is we trade something for a while, let's say seashells or gold or anything else, and then that concentrates because it centralizes, and then people build a credit-based model on top of that model, and then that gets away on itself because eventually the credit cannot be paid back, and you start manipulating the currency because you can't pay that back. So throughout time, and in fact, if you look at currencies breaking throughout time, you can see there's a cycle to how long kind of a reserve currency lasts. And that cycle is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And it's because that entire thing I just talked about competes with technology. And in the Roman times, when the currency might last for 500 or 600 years, technology was moving slow. Today, when technology is moving faster and faster, then the force of technology trying to drive prices down overcomes the debt really quickly. Because when prices go down, the debt gets more expensive, and then can't get paid back. So policymakers choose to manipulate currencies at that time to try to essentially fool the public into saying we can pay this back with cheaper dollars tomorrow that we're making up out of thin air.
And that's the fundamental reason why that sort of approach was taken by governments to have inflation over time.
Yeah, and in a credit-based economy, if your economy is based on credit, then you must have inflation or you have a credit collapse. And if you imagine, if all of the dollars aren't really existent, all of the dollars are loaned into existence, and so they're based on credit, and you have a credit collapse, then everything fails.
And are there any benefits to having credit? Is it? I mean, it can be used to fuel growth in some way, but also it comes with potential collapses as well when people abuse credit.
Yeah, and so I want to be careful here not to say credit's not all bad, it's not. It's just the way that the world worked. We have $400 trillion of credit of essentially credit money today in the world that backs our system. 400 trillion. If you tried to pay back $1 trillion, it would take 32,000 years, paying $1 a second. And so the 400 trillion is already insolvent. And people need to really kind of hear what I just said. It's already insolvent. So no matter what you do, you could have, if you had a credit collapse, if governments had a credit collapse, then every single thing that is built on top of that $400 trillion, everything is also insolvent. So house prices would fall to literally nothing. There'd be no food at your grocery store. Supply chains would fail, and you would rebuild out of the smoking ashes that what was once your economy built on credit. So why you see governments choosing the other option if they can manipulate the currency, if they have their own currency? Countries that don't have their own currency, that are pegged to the US dollar and have, you can see what's happening. Their economies are failing. And it looks like that smoking hole that I just talked about. And into that, dictators run into that void and consolidate power and remove individual rights and freedoms, to be able to consolidate to that power, and society suffers. If you have a reserve currency, for a while, you can manipulate the base of that reserve currency. You can print more currency. Everything gets more expensive for society. As a result, you concentrate wealth and power, because the people who have the assets go up. They tend to match that rise in inflation rate, and people who don't have the assets get their pocket picked, because inflation is wage deflation. But so what you can see is exactly what I just said all over the world is happening right now, because we're at the end of that cycle, and the debt is insolvent. So if the debt is insolvent and you're in the system, no matter where you are in the system, whether you think you're safe in housing, whether you think by buying more housing, whether you think you're safe in something else, effectively what you're doing is choosing to pay for the $400 trillion of insolvent debt.
And when does it stop? Because I mean, currently the plan that they seem to do every time there's an issue is they just start printing more money. The debt reserve, the debt in the US is the highest it's ever been, and it's going up exponentially now. So every time they have to do this, most recently I think it was to bail out the US banks. They're having to print loads of money or support them by doing that, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. Is there an end game there, or?
This is a global issue. It's not just in the U.S. It's just the U.S. is a reserve currency that's pegged to every other currency is pegged to it. So when the U.S. starts manipulating money, and they have been for a long time. So you remember, in the last 100 years, the average inflation rate, true inflation rate in the U.S. is about 8% a year. If you take the 100 years, and that means what used to buy $100 is now worth kind of 1% of what it used to be worth 100 years ago. And think through what I just said. So if that is when your dollar is going less and less far, but technology is embedding things that dollar should be going further and further and further. It works exactly the opposite, because we've brought in technology, and think of it in the last 100 years, but how much technology has been automated and made things more efficient. So the value of that dollar should be going the other way. And if it went the other way, what would happen is prices would fall. The free market would drive prices falling to the population through the free market. So prices would continue to fall every year. And you would get more and more every year. Population would get more for less. Instead, every year the population gets less for more work.
Yeah, and is that you talk about the similarities between capitalism and communism when there's manipulation of money? Is this the sort of thing you were talking about?
Yeah, it's the same thing. And these, if people haven't heard on your show haven't heard these concepts, they're going to want to push back on some of these concepts because they live in a system today and they measure a system today from the system with manipulation. And so that's a really hard. So it would sound like quackery from somebody outside of that system saying, here's what this system looks like, because I've always measured this system. I measure GDP from that system and I try to make GDP go up. And then I don't even calculate that my camera today is free. My calculator app is free. Where are the taxes to pay for GDP? Where is GDP in my camera or or all the photos I take or my calculator app or this Riverside app that we're doing right now that could talk to millions of people all over the world? It doesn't exist in GDP anymore because technology drives to essentially prices fall to the marginal cost of production. Technology is moving exponentially, so prices should be falling at that exponential rate to society. And the difference is you have a denominator that is expanding to match that. So you have a denominator. So essentially the money is being manipulated at a rate to offset the technology that should be flowing to you in the form of lower prices to make prices higher. And there's less and less things in GDP to make higher, right? So as technology automates the world we live in, so when you ask about your question, capitalism, communism, again, people want to push back on this because they think the rule of law protects them.
Yeah.
But ask yourself this: if you don't have a vote in the most important thing that drives your life, the money that is literally stealing your time from you, and no politician tells you have a vote, you have a vote on everything else on top of that, taxes and such. But the amount of money that's printed is a bigger driver to everything.
Yeah.
Then your vote doesn't count. It's just theater. Left and right, all of the noise, people yelling at each other on both sides of the political spectrum, because both parties will print at the exact same rate. Mm-hmm. They'll just consolidate to who will they print for, and then imagine I'm printing more and more. Imagine if you're on the socialist side of that divide, and in the socialist side of that divide, you believe government has to help us. We need that big business hurts us. Government has to help us. So let's say I'm that person, and I look through that lens. So what you're saying is effectively this: I believe we should manipulate money so government helps us. So what does that do? So that manipulation of money essentially concentrates, through what I said before, assets going up, the house prices going up, and money at the top, concentrates money at the biggest businesses because they're already there. They already own the rails. It doesn't look like capitalism. It looks like crony capitalism. So I print more money and I concentrate. And if I had one house, it goes up. If I had 10 houses, they go up more. They all go up. If I had 1,000 houses, they all go up. So the people with the most get the most because that inflation moves to the houses protect you from the inflation somewhat. And inflation is wage deflation. It is savings deflation. So I'm picking the pocket of the most productive part of society and I'm transferring it to the richest. Mm-hmm. And then those richest get elected, socialism and such, and advocate for, we need to print more money to help the poor, which concentrates more government spending to do the exact same thing at an increasing velocity, and the poor get their pocket picked faster and faster and faster. And you cannot redistribute it out of that system because the system drives it that way. Take the other side of that argument, capitalism. At least capitalism on a broken system like this. I'm going to advocate for a free market, but the free market doesn't exist if I manipulate money. There is no free market because prices of the manipulated money attach to every single other thing. So there's no way new companies can compete against the power that I've put into Facebook, Google, Apple, Microsoft. when they capture all of the gain of that manipulated money. So I drive that, and the lobbying on both sides overtakes the financial system, or sorry, the political system, and the common person is left out of that. And so, and laws change. Laws change to. I've asked this question to myself a lot. How, how could regulation protect you? How could regulation protect your money from a system designed to steal it? And what you'll see, what you'll see in there is it's hypocritical. It's a paradox, and that paradox comes from what I just said. We want to believe that these institutions help us. We make them bigger and bigger and bigger, on top of a system that is so broken that we don't pull the veil back to look what the system looks like. And so we live on top of that broken system, making it stronger and stronger from both sides, all the fighting, all the division, making that system stronger and stronger that hurts us.
And so this is the reality of today. So what makes deflation a key component for a prosperous future, which is what you've been one of the main topics of your book?
Yeah, so deflation from a credit-based system would be a catastrophe. It would fail. Now, it would still be the right thing. It would be the right move, because then you'd rebuild stronger on the other side. But deflation from a debt-based system would be a catastrophe. With $400 trillion of debt, it means all the debt would just reset. And think where that money is. So if everyone loses their jobs because the businesses can't pay and prices are going down, and the business fails because it hasn't had debt, and those people have houses, and then the banks can't make their mortgages, and the banks fail, it just capitulates really fast, and it starts to unwind. So that type of deflation from that system is I would say it's politically unfeasible if you had a reserve currency. What ends up happening instead is the population gets so mad that the central bank, whether it had independence or not, gets taken over, because the political narrative is the people will vote for more manipulation. Mm-hmm. So you will vote. And here another question to ask yourself: if a politician said to you today, what I'm telling you, essentially the truth. If a politician said, every year your wages are going to go down, but every year you're going to get more for those wages. You're going to buy more, and you're going to be able to work less each year, and you're going to be able to get more. Versus a politician that said, I'm going to give you more money. Which one would you vote for? And you can see what society does. So when we say they, it's not they, it's us. There is no they. It's only we. And the incentives created by this system make people, they're so confused. So they're essentially, what I just described is, people will vote for a lie and not understand the long-term consequences of the lie they just voted for. And then they'll think everybody else should do differently, when they themselves will vote for the short-term fix, which will make it worse. So you need a transition mechanism. And that's why I've become very, very convinced on Bitcoin, that it is a transition mechanism from a system that can't change to a system that provides essentially truth, hope, and abundance going through the future. And what lens of the world you're looking through, you're going to see that. Now, today, if you're not in Bitcoin, what that means is you're in this system, and prices are getting more expensive for you. And if you're at the top of that system, essentially you're rent seeking on the rest of society, and you're taking advantage of the theft. And eventually that's going to move into CBDC, and your money is going to be extracted from you with the press of a button. You're making that system stronger. But that's what will happen from the view of this system we're in. On both sides, people are getting hurt, and it consolidates power. On on Bitcoin, it's actually measuring. Bitcoin price isn't actually going up. What it's doing is, because it's 21 million fixed units, it's measuring what I said before. So prices in economics, prices fall to the marginal cost of production. We have exponentially increasing productivity driven by technology, meaning prices should be falling at that rate. And in Bitcoin, what you're seeing is, because of the 21 million cap, it's measuring prices falling every year. So 5 years ago, it would have cost me 50 Bitcoin to buy a house. Now it costs me 10. 2 years from now, it will probably cost me 2 or 1, and it'll keep falling.
Yeah.
But everyone will measure. So if you're measuring the system with the honest ledger, then you'll see more people joining that system with the honest ledger, and you'll see this describing the world we live in. And if you're measuring the world through the dishonest ledger, you're going to be very confused by what's going to happen. That's that phase transition that we're in the midst of right now. It's really hard to see unless you step up above what's happening and understand that. And I'm going to one more point on Bitcoin. When I was first doing that, even in my book, I described Bitcoin as a possible or plausible path to a different future. But I was open to lots of different paths. I've become convinced through kind of the other things I predicted in my book, how society would divide and you'd increasingly reinforce the existing system. The Bitcoin is the only path to the other side. The only path without war, without complete destruction, and the winner of a war resetting currency on their rules.
And I suppose that is related to sort of what Ray Dalio is saying, that, over time, even the powers that have the reserve currency, it's sort of, they lose that power over time, and there's another power that takes over, and that's just the way things work. Is that sort of what you were?
Yes. So the one
is another sort of option moving forward.
Yeah. So the one thing Ray, I think he dramatically misses, but this would be normal. I think he's incredibly smart. I think his work has done like, it's really great historically, looking at what's happened historically. But he's not a technologist, and he doesn't understand the impact of technology on all of these decisions. And if there's a technology that changes the rules, like Bitcoin, we've never seen something that could be decentralized and secure and gets more decentralized and secure every year.
Yeah.
So we always had to have institutions protecting us with rule of law to be able to, because we couldn't have decentralization and security together. You had to centralize in it through an institution and then protect humanity through rule of law. Magna Carta, U.S. Constitution, really great kind of laws that would enshrine freedoms to society. And with those freedoms, the society was more productive, and the productive economies grew faster and did better. But once that's captured, you realize the laws are changed to protect the institution. And so in looking backwards, what would happen over time is then the lower cost society, lower cost labor would aggregate all the productivity, like China today, and you would have a new nation that would compete. U.S. did it to Great Britain, or England. China's right now in the process with the U.S. It's happened over and over through time as that happened, and the winning nation in productivity accumulated more gold, and then and was more productive. Their economies were more productive, and it shifted typically through war. China's growth miracle today is different. China's growth miracle is from essentially the Triffin dilemma and pegging their currency to the US dollar and keeping their labor rate low. and having massive debt to be able to do it. So China's debt to GDP is about 350% to debt to GDP. So they are in a debt trap and a debt spiral. On top of that, their demographics are horrific. Their population is getting smaller, and it's going to accelerate.
Where has that come from? Has that come from their one-child policy from years ago?
Yeah. On top of that, they have 20% youth unemployment rate right now, and they have no way to get out of this, because the same thing is true for them. Productivity drives prices down, and they have a model built on driving prices up. 25% of their entire economy is housing, because people thought or think that I can store my wealth in housing and it can't be stolen. And there's a whole bunch of people think that. For a while it works, because you manipulate money, everybody races to housing, and it feeds back on itself. But if your entire economy, or 25% of your economy, is housing, and you have 350% debt to GDP that can't be paid back, and people start losing their jobs, housing collapses without massive more stimulus. So there is not a chance, not a hope in that China is going to be the new nation that rules them all, like the US. There will not be another reserve currency like the US. And so I consider Ray in that conversation either conflicted because he invested a lot in China, or misinformed about what's happening with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's transitioning the system to a neutral reserve asset around the world that everybody can use, an open monetary network that is neutral, that nobody has power over. I understand through the lens of history, I understand Ray Dalio's point, everything else, and what he believes, but I can tell you I normally don't do this, but because I speak in probabilities. But this probability of China being the new reserve currency and ruling is so infinitesimally small that I can say it's a zero.
Yeah, I've heard about the demographic argument from quite a few places. It's a lot worse than people imagine. I don't know. They obviously know about it as well, so I don't know what they're going to try and do to.
But again, even if you just went up another level, a centrally controlled society can't outperform a free market, because the central authority has to make all decisions, and the central authority can't see what's in the minds of each person, and what we would do when things change our mind. So when something comes out, to take the iPhone versus the BlackBerry as an example, for me, I was convinced I would never sell my BlackBerry. I liked it a lot. And then when I saw the new thing that was invented, that was being worked on for 3 years before I saw it, I changed in a second. So how could any centralized authority understand what that looked like in every single human being on this planet? And so that's why free markets always outperform centralized markets. And so we just live in a unique period of time. And I'll go one further. Do you think all over the world people are going to trust a digital yuan that's not going to be manipulated one day, and want to live in a totalitarian state that a single ruler tells you what you can do and when you can get up in the morning and brush your teeth and get on a train? Do you think the world is going to live in that world? And so when you think through these implications, you just go, there's no chance.
Yeah.
Especially when there's an open monetary network that people can just walk across a bridge and start using, and stop paying for the concentration of power through their labor in what they're doing. So they can just walk over to the new system and have all the benefits starting immediately out of the new system that will accrue to them. As more and more people see that, open their eyes to what's going on, more and more people will move to the new system.
And if we could just take it back to the technologies that are actually driving this deflation, because I know you touched on a few of them. Could you explain them to us and how they're causing such rapid deflation across the
Well,
world?
there's many, and when people here's what will happen naturally. What people they won't see the technologies in every single thing they're doing. They'll see the technology. They'll see, oh, okay, I get what he's saying. TVs come down every year, but I buy a new TV every year or two, right? And I could wait forever and not buy a TV, but I don't. I buy what I need. My computer gets more powerful every year. I buy a computer every couple of years. My phone gets better. I buy that. I could wait for 10 years until it delivered me more value and then buy, but I don't. I continue to buy as it constantly does that. But they don't see that all prices would do that same thing, and that those prices of the computer equipment and TVs would fall at a faster rate than everything else. What they're doing is they're measuring the technology just inside the things that are moving the fastest, instead of the technology in all things. Because we have technology in home building, we have technology in oil production, we have technology in every single thing. We have technology in energy, we have technology in everything. So it's a base layer that is moving at a rate. So that means all things should be falling at that rate, or at a rate, some faster than others. And if they did, what would happen? If they did, the biggest, fattest, juiciest margins is where entrepreneurs would attack next. Because as things went to free, like, there's no entrepreneurs creating the next calculator app,
Yeah.
because it's already free. So they go and attack the next industry. So if you allow prices to fall and people essentially, as jobs are left out of the economy because of the technology, those people race to new industries or to high margin industries and attack those and deliver value there, and those prices fall too faster. But let's just probably the greatest one today would be artificial intelligence, and how fast that's moving. And you remember this from my book, but when I said, in the past 20 years, the technology is growing so fast that it took $185 trillion of debt to produce $46 trillion of GDP growth. So almost 4 to 1 debt for every dollar of GDP. That doesn't seem like a really great economic transaction, right? It doesn't seem something stable. But what I said is, it's going to get way worse. And why it's going to get way worse is the trend line for AI has been the exact same trend line for almost 60 years. But it's an exponential trend line. So if you're measuring linear, then all of a sudden when GTB comes out, you're oh my God, what happened? If you're measuring it exponentially, you go, yeah, that's totally natural. That's exactly when that should come out. And so you're seeing the trend line, and that's really important. It hasn't changed. It's not just like one day we woke up and here's AI around us. It's been the exact same trend line for 60 years. It's just an exponential trend line. And why that matters for the GDP and why that matters for everything else is that trend line is moving at an exponential rate, and that means our debt or manipulation of money has to move at the corresponding exponential rate. So when I wrote in the book that it's not the looking backwards I'm worried about, it's the division of society looking forward on that exponential trend line. That's what I was talking about. Mm-hmm. And in artificial intelligence, I wrote something else in the book that said human intelligence is just error correction. And so what's happening is that human intelligence is being moved into computers at a very fast rate, and it's going to merge at some point down the road, and it's going to merge. And today, you can see some of the productivity gains that it can apply to work today in the digital realm, and it's behind the scenes in most things you do, removing labor at a crazy rate. Whether the labor's gone yet or it's about to go, it's going to remove labor at a crazy rate. Now, Jeff, you'll only see right now the things that are in digital realm. I have a friend of mine who runs a robotics company called Sanctuary AI, building artificial general intelligence into robots. He is in front of Tesla right now, That company is in front of Tesla right now. And these robots can do most things humans can do. But when you tell them to operate a store, they don't do a single task like a cashier at a store or automatic checkout. They run the entire store. They determine when I should offload the truck, when I should load shelves, when I should do cashier work. They run the store. And so he thinks within 3 years that the labor rate on that robot would be $5 an hour.
Wow.
So when you put these trends together,
so these robots are already at this sophistication level now.
They're already there. They're already there, and they're growing. And so what you've done is you have artificial intelligence is moving at that rate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the exponential rate, and people are measuring. I would say people are looking at a frame of a movie instead of watching the movie. So they're thinking, okay, I can handle this rate of artificial intelligence here. It's going to make my productivity better. So they start using it, and prices fall, and the people who use it gain most of the value, whether you're a business or a user, super user of it. You're gaining most of the value from prices falling. And if other people who aren't using it are going to zero, whether their business is going to zero in time, whether they're going to zero because they're not on the leading edge. So if it took $100 in value and it went to 60, and you took most of the 60 because you were the super user of artificial intelligence and you knew how to use it for free, then you would build a better business than the person that was living in the old world.
Yeah.
And then somebody will do it to you at $40, and then 20, and prices will fall as a result of that competition. So the people that are essentially what you're doing, what the world is doing right now, is with their actions to compete, to give more value to people who use their services, or to make more value, to make more money for themselves in this system. They're racing in, training the artificial intelligence faster with all of their work. And that's becoming better and better and better. And at some point it won't need you. So there's a short-term game that everybody should learn these tools as fast as they can, because you'll win more of the economic energy by doing so. But the long-term gain is prices accelerate to zero faster.
And can I ask your opinion on AI and jobs? What you're talking about? That there's a train of thought that it's obviously going to increase productivity for the selection of people that adopt it, and obviously there'll be job losses in some areas, and then not everyone, but some people are talking about the fact that it will also create job opportunities that will sort of balance that out. Is that your opinion, or is there going to be way more job losses than there is?
Completely opposite. That's the point. That's the point. Those people that are saying that either haven't worked in the free market, and they're writing research reports from economists outside of a system that relies on manipulation of money, or they have not thought through what's happening. So how could something, and think through this, if your labor is going to be $5 an hour, and it doesn't need a coffee break, and it doesn't need union fees, it doesn't everything else, and it's more intelligent than you, what job is safe?
Yes, I mean, the more sophisticated it gets, even the more creative jobs, and everything is everything's at risk, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. But the point is, why do we need the job in the first place? Why is nobody right now walking into your office there while we're doing this podcast and giving you oxygen? Like, why don't we have jobs for people to pass around oxygen to us? It would seem ludicrous, right?
Yeah.
Because oxygen's abundant, and so entrepreneurs go somewhere else where there's scarcity and they create abundance. And so why don't we have as many jobs in the photo industry anymore, like we had when Kodak was around and we were buying film that was just being distributed all over the world, and we were developing that film for the same reason. As technology does our labor, we're supposed to benefit from the technology doing the labor as prices fall to the marginal cost of production. That is the natural rule of life. The problem is we live in a system that has convinced us that we have to work more and more and more to be able to get more and more jobs, when they're only being when the only reason prices are rising is because of the system that we've allowed essentially godlike control to manipulate money and put the rest of society in slavery.
And so, what does this mean for the future? I mean, does it so that if the marginal cost of everything, even energy, goes down, so that all the costs of living essentially go down, but there's no jobs available either? What world? How does the world operate in that sense?
So why wouldn't why wouldn't the world operate perfectly?
No,
Like
yeah,
why? And by the way, this is why this is so hard to see, because it's such the world we've never seen this world. There's no history book that we can say this is what it looks like. So we have to use first principles to what I'm talking about. We have to actually get to the base layer of knowledge and say why, and we have to reconstruct a better world. And so, what would that look like? On the way through, it's going to be a messy transition. But if you're measuring from the new system, Bitcoin, then it's going to just be this transition, and it's what it's going to feel like is more and more people are joining your hopeful world, and you're going to get more and more wealthy, and productive members of society are going to win, and members of society that are rent seeking, kind of stealing from productive members of society, are going to lose, and it's going to transition the world to that system. But in time, like if you just why the marginal cost of production would fall on the robots is because once now you've automated the robots, once they're machines, then there's the technology embeds there too, and prices continue to fall. And if that happened, then artificial intelligence and robotics, then food can be free and energy can be free. Bitcoin's chasing abundant energy all over the world. It's a pricing mechanism to chase abundant energy. So what you're seeing is the world that we're moving into, we need a lot more energy. The most robust economies use a bunch more energy. The reason we're capped in energy right now is the capital projects to be able to get energy and centralize energy. But when you have a mechanism like Bitcoin that's chasing abundant energy, it decentralizes, and you now you have a way to be able to build to abundant energy. Again, if people haven't not done this work, this is going to be a brain scratcher for them at first. This is but once they start to go through this, the things that we're talking about here on this podcast, it literally is a transition. I call Bitcoin a bridge to the other side. An economic system today that cannot resolve the conflict, and a transition path that can. And that transition path is going to be chaotic. It's going to be messy, and you're going to the world's going to be a mirror of your beliefs. And if you believe, and if you believe in the existing system, then the mirror back to you will create some. I would suggest a lot of pain.
And just coming back to AI, is there a scenario or potential scenarios where AI could be harmful? I know a lot of people are scared about that sort of side of it. Is that in your opinion? What do you think?
So absolutely.
Yeah.
If you centralize anything, it will be harmful, because what you're doing is you're saying have you ever heard power crops by power crops? Absolutely. That's what would happen is if you concentrate AI into Google's hands or Facebook's hands or name Elon Musk's hands.
Yeah.
Do you think he will not change the world to look like the way he wants to, versus, or any government's hands? They will abuse the power just like all governments do when they have too much power. And so the point of, and that's only happening. The only reason that's concentrating is because we allow the manipulation of money. So the manipulation of money concentrates all those gains in very few people's hands. That is the point. So do I worry about that? Yes, I worry about that. I'll give you, 2 months ago, ChatGPT came out, $20 a month. Right now, you could download ChatGPT for all and have 6 different models that compete against ChatGPT for free on your computer. You don't need the internet. So you have the world's, whether you know it or not, every single person listening to this could have the world's information, entire history of the world's information in an AI on their laptop. They don't need the internet after they've downloaded it for free. They don't have to pay $20 a month. And so I just described to you prices falling to the marginal cost per production at an alarming rate. And what you can do with that and what else you can do with that is just mind-blowing if people start using it. But if you're manipulating the money, all of those gains, all those productivity gains that should be flowing to society in the form of lower prices, get concentrated up into a few people. So that is why I'm talking about Bitcoin. That's exactly why I'm talking. I see it as the only transition path that we know governments won't allow the productivity gains to flow to society because the debt is too high. It would explode. So we know people wouldn't do that because they'll vote for more government and more spending. Mm-hmm. So we have to have a system that is beyond our reproach, that is a system for all of us, by all of us, that is impossible to change the rules that allow that productivity to flow to us in the form of lower prices. And I haven't seen, there is not a system that I've seen that could be another system like Bitcoin. So that's how that happens. It transitions from this really dystopian world, all of that fear that people are doing. And remember, what they will do out of the fear is probably make it stronger. They will vote for more regulation. They will vote for somebody telling them, I'll save you from the AI, and I just need this much money. They will vote for more spending to protect their job when they lose they'll vote for more UBI and more social services to because it can't go broke. I need to make more money. They will make that whole system stronger, which is why concurrently, as they do, you need a system designed to be able to take that economic energy and redistribute it into everybody's hands.
Well, there's some interesting topics about the future for everyone to digest there. But yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about blockchain on the podcast and its benefits. Obviously, we're talking about Bitcoin specifically in this scenario because of its relation to money.
Ed, can I just and I want you to look at it too, but also your listeners. There is not a blockchain that will work other than Bitcoin.
Yeah,
they're all going to zero. And if you read an article that I wrote called it's on my website jeffbooth.ca called "Finding Signal in a Noisy World," that will explain at a first principles why I just said what I did. I don't say that because I want to make money. I don't say that, but short term, and people could trade other things, but I think that's a really risky bet today. There isn't an economic rationale for having a centralized blockchain because a database is more efficient.
Yeah, that's true. Although, so we do cover Bitcoin miners, cover some of the exchanges. So they're not typically not other cryptocurrencies, but they're using the technology or involved in the industry, and a lot of them are involved with Bitcoin.
So I'm investing in. So Bitcoin mining is a thing. What Bitcoin mining does is it protects the base layer through an economic incentive. But what really protects that base layer is the millions of nodes, or the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of nodes that keep those rules in check, that wouldn't change those rules. So I run a node, and my node costs insignificant to be able to run. If you centralize to a few actors and my node cost to be able to audit the blockchain increases to $50,000 or $500,000 a year, then very few people make decisions for the entire network. So one of the things about Bitcoin keeping that distributed is it by having kind of low block size, small block size, and the way this is run by computers and mining equipment chasing abundant energy, is it gets more and more decentralized and secure every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where people are measuring Bitcoin right now, is they're measuring that against everything else. And what they're saying is, well, I can't do these other things on Bitcoin. I couldn't do smart contracts on Bitcoin. So there has to be Ethereum to do smart contracts. But what they don't realize is if you did smart contracts in the base layer, it would increase the block size and destroy what I just said. Mm-hmm. So the superpower of Bitcoin is it's not what people think it is. It's a layered approach to building technology. It's a protocol instead of a coin. And so TCP/IP is a base layer of the internet, and what we're doing right now on this call. That was developed by DARPA in the 60s, and protocols have to harden, because if you build the next layer on top of the first layer while it's still not working, then the entire thing falls down. So protocols harden and first. And so for 10 years in Bitcoin, you could do nothing but hold it and get rich. Nothing. You couldn't build on it. You couldn't do anything else. So anybody that wanted to do something chased all of these other ideas because mm-hmm. you could do things on them. So it makes perfect sense from an economic rationale that people would do this. It makes perfect sense that once they did, they would want to promote their coin, because even if they didn't know it would work long term, they needed to get out. It makes perfect sense in a world that looks like this. But what they didn't see is the next layer on Bitcoin, and you couldn't see that until it was delivered, like lightning, that then gave a transaction layer that was super fast and allowed scaling on top of Bitcoin without risking the first layer. So you'd have this layered approach. And I'm investing in that ecosystem through Ego Death Capital. And I can tell you that people are totally misinformed on what's coming on top of Bitcoin and how fast this is coming. Real value that delivers value that can't be manipulated and centralized. But that had to form over a long time, just like the internet formed over a long time. And so it will become the new peer-to-peer internet tied mm-hmm. to energy. That's what's going to happen. And in doing so, a lot of these other coins, I just don't see a utility. I can't see one utility.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for giving us the time to have this wonderful chat. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we wrap up.
No, just one thing. If you're looking for me, just jeffbooth.ca is probably the best site. And I say that because there's just so many scammers and impersonators out there right now. And I keep updated on that list, any of the social sites that I'm on. And if it's not on that list, if it's not on that site, do not believe it.
And your handle on Twitter, can you remind me of that?
At Jeff Booth.
At Jeff Booth. We'll put that in the show notes as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks.
Looks like a wonderful day there. I can see it's sunny outside, but yeah. We'll hopefully talk again soon. And thanks for all your information today.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ed.